When I think about all the disappointing entries in my favourite game franchises like Halo 4, Soul Calibur 5, Metal Gear Solid 5, nothing really compares to Mortal Kombat 2011. It's been 5 years since this game saw release and it still hurts. It really is no exaggeration to say that once was a time when Mortal Kombat was my favourite series in any medium. Now, I first reviewed this game back in 2012, so I'm sure the most prevalent question about this whole thing is, why? Why review a game I already spent 2 hours lambasting 4 years ago? Well, I want to approach it differently this time, focus on more important stuff and cut down on some of the nitpicks. I've got a bunch of new things to discuss and hopefully I can more clearly and concisely convey my opinion on certain topics. Once again, because this is the internet, it needs stressing that I am not criticising people who like the game. If you do, that is fine. But that being said, getting upset about my opinion is a totally legitimate response because, obviously, I chose to hate a game in my favourite franchise, you fucking idiots! I first discovered the series when I was about 7 or 8, and my dad bought me MK4 for the PC. I liked it well enough, but it wasn't until I tried Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance around 2002-2003 that I really fell in love with the series. To me, that's when the series mechanics actually became fun and deep, instead of the shallow, simplistic gameplay of the previous titles. After that, I was hooked. I check fan sites daily for any new information about upcoming releases, from Deception to Shaolin Monks to Armageddon to DCU, and to this day, Mortal Kombat Deception is easily in my top 3 favourite fighting games of all time. But then MK 2011 happened. See, by the mid-aughts, the series had 61 playable characters, each with years of backstory to keep up with, and unfortunately, most of the characters introduced after the jump to 3D weren't all that popular among fans. And so, 2006's Mortal Kombat Armageddon was conceived. The team at Midway said, screw it, let's bring everyone back for one last bash and have most of them die off for good. Just wipe the slate clean and do a Tekken 3 style time skip and start fresh with the new cast of warriors with some old favourites sticking around. All told, the game had 62 playable characters plus a custom character slot and female chameleon in the Wii port. The endings weren't very conclusive, but the stage was set for a great continuation. 2008 saw the release of the next entry, Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe, an entry that received a somewhat lukewarm reception, but may have proved integral in how the series moved forward. See, just 3 months after DCU release, Midway Games filed for bankruptcy. Most of their franchises unfortunately faded into obscurity, but Mortal Kombat was purchased by DC's parent company, Warner Bros. I believe that MK vs DCU is what put the series in WB's line of sight until the bankruptcy and led to it being purchased. I don't doubt that the series would have been bought by someone regardless, but I feel that the series going to WB may have impacted how the series was developed from then on. Under WB Games, most of the MK team were brought on to form NetherRealm Studios, primarily to produce MK games but also other similar fighting games like Injustice Gods Among Us and WWE Immortals. But enough of the history lesson. What is Mortal Kombat 2011? MK9, as it's often known because DCU is considered the main title, is properly called Mortal Kombat. Just Mortal Kombat. Because that's not confusing or stupid at all. I mean, I do get it, the game was a brand new beginning for the franchise after all. In addition to overhauling graphics, gameplay and violence, the game also overhauled the story in an attempt to make it easy to follow. How did they accomplish this? They created a fully fleshed out story mode to more clearly convey the game's narrative, which itself was a key part of this fresh start by being a reboot. But not the traditional start over with a new continuity style of reboot, oh no. This is an in-continuity reboot. Basically, the reboot is brought about by events within the story itself. The 2009 Star Trek film is a good example of this. So I have to wonder if this was Warner Bros. Idea, since DC has a long-standing history of doing this exact thing. As a result of all this, the game's roster consists of the entire cast of the original 3 games, except Motaro, who the team find too hard to animate in 3D, and Rain, whose absence is unjustified and likely just to make room for the ruiner of everything himself, Quan Chi, a character who has no place in MK1 to 3 but is here anyway. The PlayStation versions also feature Kratos from the God of War series, a character for whom my contempt is eclipsed only by his near identical cousin, although as far as guest characters go he's probably the best fit for MK. Naturally, one of the conditions for his inclusion was that he can never do anything goofy or show fear in the face of a fatality because he's special. Supposedly Sweet Tooth and Twisted Metal was also considered before they settled on Kratos. Xbox and PC versions received nothing to make up for this, which is the worst way to do guest characters. In addition to costumes, post-release DLC features 4 more characters, each of whom represented a particular theme in my eyes. A new character, Scarlet, a 3D era character, Kenshi, a 2D era character, Rain, and a guest character, Freddy friggin' Krueger. Sadly, there was no extra story content surrounding these 4, not even adding them into the background of cutscenes like Scarlet already is. Just imagine a bonus chapter where Kenshi fights Rain, Scarlet and Ermac during or after the event of the story. In fact, if you pay attention at the end of chapter 8, Shang Tsung calls on Kenshi and Reiko for the next tournament fight, so there was room there for more story, but they didn't do anything with it. Visually, the game looks great, although the cutscenes are pre-rendered and noticeably compressed, which somewhat diminishes how good the visuals are. But there's tons of little details in the background, and some of the costumes are the best the characters have ever had. I mean, just look at Scorpion here. Blood and other effects stick to the characters, and they receive cuts, bruises and torn clothing as they take damage is great, even if it is a little bit excessive. The voice cast is great, there aren't any bad performances, and whether they returned from DCU or took on the role for the first time, everyone did at least a good job. Some of them even managed to pull out a surprising range of voices. I feel like particular praise needs to go to Patrick Seitz, Karen Strassman, Richard Epcar, Matthew Mercer and Jeff Pilson. The former 3 do a fantastic job in spite of the bad elements of their respective character stories, and definite credit to the latter 2 for their contributions to their characters. Most especially Strassman and Epcar. Epcar perfectly captures the burden of not only what Raiden must prevent, but also what happens as a result of his actions. Strassman, meanwhile, actually managed to make me care about Kitana's story for the first time ever. She got the opportunity to portray a variety of emotions and then got to have some fun as Melina. But to get back on point, surely streamlining the story to make it less convoluted is a good thing, right? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see in a little while. For now though, I think it's best to start with the gameplay, since that is the most important part of the game, how the game actually plays. You can forgive a lot with weak or even bad stories if the gameplay is good enough, but it's not.